So welcome to this session, which I almost can promise will be one of the most interesting in this conference. We have 4 extremely interesting contributions. The first one is by Albert Kamp, CDIO, Can We Continue the Way We Are? Next, it's Suzanne Brink and several colleagues from different universities and countries about assessing curriculum agility in CDIO engineering education. That is so exciting. And the next is from Kuntine Maneratana and Danai Vangsuttaraka about student engagement, and they are proposing an optional standard. So very exciting. And finally, Anders Rosén and colleagues from KTH Royal Institute of Technology have applied the new optional standard for sustainable development and evaluated all engineering programs. So that will be really interesting to see. Now, I think because we have 4 such interesting papers, there will be very difficult to have the time sufficient for everyone. So I propose that we do like this. We take 1 paper at a time and devote 15 minutes or 14.5 because this minute has to be accounted for. And so we show the video in the cases where we have a video, and we discuss that paper until it's time to move on to the last paper. But I would like to suggest that while the video is running, you are allowed to ask questions in the chat. And perhaps even the authors might answer some of those questions, the easiest ones, while the video is running, because they are not talking even though we are hearing them. So Albert, we will start by showing your video, and then you have about the same amount of minutes to answer questions and discussions. So please, could the host play the first video?
CDIO, can we continue the way we are? Are you aware that our CDIO community of practice is actually a living organism? Strong, well established, with a framework, a syllabus, a set of standards and regular meetings? And that organisms go through a natural life cycle that usually begins with an idea and often ends with a shutdown when the purpose is fulfilled and little or no value remains. In what stage of the life cycle are we actually? We have seen a strong growth. We are mature. We see Latin America starting full swing, maybe followed by Africa. Asia is going strong. Europe and UK Ireland are in full operation, but North America and Australia are dying out. We have got to stay in shape for the future. What if we keep on doing as we have always done? Will we become obsolete? Will we die? Will we break up in child groups that go their own way while the global community fades away? Only if we maintain and renew CDIO, we make sure the framework and community stays alive and kicking. And this paper tells you how. Do you know CDIO's current vision statement? I'm afraid you don't. Well, we need a stronger one that expresses we are worldwide. Our aim is to educate responsible engineers who can innovate and design creative and above all workable solutions. These are the unique features of CDIO. And currently we miss a mission statement that tells us how we will get to where we want to be. We get there by building capacity, by an inclusive collaboration to make an open, flexible and evolving framework, by sharing practices for the benefit of your local institution. If we take it seriously, we have to adopt the new vision and mission statement, act accordingly, convey our new messages at every opportunity. And we need to shift our focus. Not seldom do I hear from the more senior members that we have been overemphasizing project-based learning for too long time, and it is diluting the unique value of our framework. In this digital era, Isn't it way more important to bundle our efforts on what to do and how to implement the digital transformation in the field of engineering into our curricula? Many of us are lagging behind, have difficulty in getting a good grasp of it. For CDIO, the digital transformation is a golden opportunity. We can really make a difference. And we have grown from 4 to more than 180 members. This unlimited growth leads to a higher level of anonymity, and not seldom drops the engagement of members soon after they have joined, even after they have presented over-ambitious CDIO implementation plans in their application. Shouldn't we use each other's expertise and experience more effectively, improve the quality of our programs with the help of the peers? Many institutions would love to have more interaction. They've come up to me with this recommendation of cyclic peer-to-peer reviews by and for each member. Reviews that should also enable us to build up evidence that CDIO pays off, and your and our graduates outperform others. And then there is a strong call for recognition of CDIO by the outside world. But where is it? Where are our ties with industries, branch organizations, accreditation agencies, corporate universities? Who can give us that recognition? Why don't we involve them actively, give them some kind of status in our community? When I adopted the calls for a new direction, a shift in focus, a desire for recognition, more engagement, more learning from each other, evidence of the added value of CDIO and the need for stronger ties with the outside world. When I combine that with the unlimited growth, a winding down of senior members and a lack of resources, from all the voices I've heard at the workshops, I can only conclude that our organizational structure is not adequate. Apart from the council, it's flat. There is no structure. There is no differentiation, and we don't have any resources that we can use to advance CDIO. If we take all the above seriously, we should give different kinds of members different duties, powers and responsibilities, differentiating between active members, occasional members and peripheral members. Did I invent this all by myself? No, I didn't. This is a consolidation of 10 workshops I ran in 2017, 18 and 19 in Canada, Australia, Russia, the Netherlands, France, Denmark and Singapore, and Helene ran one in China. Altogether, consulting about 150 unique participants. My conclusion is that after 20 years after its inception, CDIO is at the crossroads. We can go on as we have always done, and in that case the community will live its life cycle, or we turn the tide and change. At the workshops I have heard voices of many experienced members who have reached the saturation phase. For many of them, the value of CDIO diminishes as they have achieved the goals they had in mind. They want to repurpose CDIO and stress the maturity phase. And I agree, regardless of being a senior or junior member of the community, I expect CDIO gives me guidance, helps me understand how I can bring my education up to standards in this rapidly changing world. We all want to keep CDIO alive and kicking, so we have to advance the framework and community. We have to break new grounds. We must have the courage to act beyond what we have always done. Thank you very much.
Right, so we have 6-7 minutes to discuss Albert's paper and proposal. Who wants to start? Clément, you unmuted yourself.
Yes, well, thank you very much, Albert, for this very interesting presentation. I totally agree with you. I think it's extremely important to reshape, and it's a great initiative. The world is changing and we must adapt. So I can only support what you're doing. But how do you see it implemented? How do you see what will be the next step? I guess you want to present these recommendations at the next, as the coming council tomorrow or Wednesday. I can't remember when it is.
Yeah, that's right. On Wednesday, we will have a council meeting, and then this discussion about this paper will be on the agenda as well. And that's the very right question. How are we going to do it? Because actually, all what we're doing is all on a voluntary basis. We have no staff. We have no, well, we have an office, but that is not able to, well, to restructure or to change all the things that I'm telling that we might have to do. So that is the big puzzle that the council have to think about next Wednesday. How, if we agree to do something, then how are we going to do it? I don't have that straight answer just by myself.
No, you're not proposing a plan to a roadmap. The roadmap has not been discussed yet, right?
No, the roadmap as such is not there. It is just, I mean, this is the consolidation of all the workshops that we have had, and these are the sounds from the community.
Okay.
The voices.
Thank you very much, Edgar. Thank you.
Yeah.
Very good.
So Jens Bennison has his hand in the air.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And as always, Aldo, thanks a lot for a thought-provoking paper and presentation here. I think for me, one of the issues is also who is CDIO for? Is it for the people who are teaching? Is it for the researchers? Is it for the managers? Is it for top-level management? So I really think we need to have also a discussion on, well, what are we for? Because I see this trend between, well, we're presenting something that is useful for people. I was just in a very interesting session about group examinations, for example. Super interesting for people who are practitioners in their teaching. And then we have a lot of standards talking about how we develop study programs and stuff like that. So I really think we need to also have a discussion on the purpose here. Do we need to have a rector's council for people who are involved in management or stuff like that, apart from your structure about, well, we need to have active members and less active members and stuff like that? We probably also need to have different slicings of that diagram.
Yeah, very good point, Jens. Yeah, we'll take that up. Yeah.
Thank you. Emil van Puffelen.
Thank you, Aldert. Thank you, Christina. A very small thought of mine. Of course, we'd like to stick to the letters CDIO. If you change them, there will be nothing left, I think. But we might try to find other words for CDIO. So that's just an idea.
And how could that help us in changing focus?
Well, CDIO is, the letters are pointing to project-based education. And if we want to not focus only on project-based education, we might find some other letters. But it's just one of the small things you could think about.
We shouldn't forget our heritage, of course. But okay, it's a topic I will bring with me next Wednesday as well. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, Suzanne has a question. Oh, it's
yes, but it's
for
actually
later.
for all
Sorry,
that
I can see
later.
you want. Yeah. So does anybody have a suggestion if Aldert's analysis is right? What kind of concrete suggestions could there be? If I can say something myself, I was intrigued by the first graph you had where you showed how different regions and are on different places on that curve. And I think, at least in my experience, I think CDIO is quite unique, that a lot of the old members, even founding members, have stayed on for 20 years, actually more than 20 years now. And I can see people in this session who have actually been in CDIO for 20 years or almost 20 years. And one of the activities that has really engaged us has been to work with new members and to guide them in taking the first steps, often in developing their engineering education programs. So I think that has been a source of constant creativity, and it's felt like a really worthwhile thing to do. But of course, if you're only thinking about if you yourself are running in the cutting edge frontier, maybe you get tired of discussing with newbies all the time. But I think discussing with newbies is one of the wonderful things about CDIO, I have to admit.
I think you're
Sorry,
right.
I spent so much time on my questions, so the alarm sounded, and it's actually time to go to the next paper. Can I ask the host to please play the curriculum agility video?
Welcome to our presentation on curriculum agility in a CDIO engineering education. We've written this paper with 7 people from different universities. I'll be presenting it together with Carl-Johan Carlsen today. Together with Frederick Jehosen from Umeå University, we talked about a better adjustability of universities in 2017 in Calgary. And we decided to organize a workshop on the next CDIO conference in Kanazawa 2018. From there on, we organized several more meetings, each time in a different format, but always working with participants such as yourselves on the concept of curriculum agility, as we decided to call it. In Aarhus 2019, the group of 7 authors gathered, and we're still working on this, and we'll have a roundtable tomorrow on this. So if you want to become a participant in our focus group, then please visit us there. All the results of these sessions were and are processed anonymously, of course, for our research. We formulated a definition of curriculum agility in the first 2 focus group sessions, and based on that in the third, we formulated 7 principles of curriculum agility. So an agile curriculum is responsive and adaptable to changes in societal, industrial, and student characteristics and needs, by having the capacity to change structures, learning outcomes, and learning activities in a timely manner. Together with our participants, we established why it's important to have an agile curriculum. We want to be able, as engineering programs, to adapt to societal needs, to industry needs, to newest technologies. We want to be able to swiftly develop new content in that sense. And we want to be able to adapt to the student who increasingly needs more flexibility in our education. Besides this trend of more customized education for individuals, we see other trends such as how people are increasingly looking for meaningfulness in what they do, and that counts for students as well in what they study. How companies innovate together and multidisciplinary working is so much more important. How a new game-changing technology is going to be on the horizon, and we don't even know it yet. And if we see how artificial intelligence, robots, intelligent systems take over in education, and this is happening right now with the COVID pandemic a little faster perhaps than we would have anticipated. So there's multiple reasons why we need to be able to easily adjust our education. In that sense, an agile curriculum works on 3 levels. It's about a flexible customization of education for the student. It's about dynamic content of what we teach, that we can teach the newest available. And it's about having a responsive organization, that the decisions can be made in a timely manner, etc. And those levels we see back in the 7 principles that we've formulated with our focus groups on curriculum agility. So the first 4 are on this responsive organization level, and the latter 3 are more on the dynamic content and flexible customization. The first principle deals with stakeholder involvement. They should be part of the institutional structures and procedures, and they should be involved to identify and prioritize new needs in education. The second principle is about organization and governance. So the organizational structure should effectively address the administrative system and the institutional and national regulations in order to be able to implement and maintain curriculum changes. We've had to deal with this a lot, all of us, under the pandemic, of course. The same goes for the program level, having an effective curriculum and course approval process, timeframes, steps required, numbers of persons involved, communication channels. These are all things that can increase or decrease the agility of the program. The fourth principle focuses on management, so having an entrepreneurial management, establishing and maintaining an initiative-driven change culture. So rather than having a one-person engagement, having a culture within the team and stimulating proactive behavior of the program rather than reactive. Then on content level, program and course designers allowed flexibility in content and learning outcomes. Can you have adjustable projects? Can the learning goals be adjusted easily for different kinds of challenges that you set to students? Can you provide them with extra opportunities, the students, to build up their own profiles while doing the obligatory courses? And in that sense, on the whole, encouraging initiatives and innovation that promotes education that is responsive and adaptive to change is a very important principle, of course. And the seventh principle is about the pedagogy and didactics, about promoting scholarship of both teaching and learning amongst teachers and students, encouraging collegial teaching teams, encouraging innovative didactics. So these are the 7 principles in short. And our next step is going to be to make an assessment tool with which we can assess our programs on how agile we actually are and where we want to develop more agility. So it might turn out to be much like a rubric tool like we have for the standards for CDIO. We did, however, notice that during the pandemic, a lot of curriculum agility was necessary and a lot of things changed and happened and had to be swiftly altered. But we're not sure yet if that's covered in our principles. When we wrote the principles, this was pre-pandemic, so we were mainly focusing on the content, the industry, technology, society developing quickly. But there's these things like pandemics and we can have them again. So our steps right now are to look at our principles and see what happened to us in the past year and a half and whether that's encapsulated in those principles enough or if we need to reformulate or add perhaps a principle. So that's what we're working on in the roundtable tomorrow. And of course, you're all very welcome to come and join us there. I want to thank you for your attention and would like to use the rest of the time for questions and discussion.
Thank you so much, Suzanne and colleagues, for this great contribution. We have the first question from Jens Bennelsen. Would you like to pose it yourself?
Sure. I was just, you're saying you're developing the next thing is some kind of assessment tool. So I was just wondering, where do you see in the group that are presenting here, the majority of your study programs that currently, how are they with respect to agility? I don't know if you can take a scale from 0 to 10 or something like that. So where are they currently, and what's the most kind of troublesome of the 7 principles that you see currently with respect to agility? Because reflecting back on the pandemic, I did not kind of see a lot of changes in learning outcomes or changes in something else. I saw a lot of tweaking where we had to tweak something with respect to, for example, making teaching and learning online instead of physical. So we need to tweak something with respect to lab work, or we need to tweak something with respect to examination, but not what I would kind of understand as big shifts.
Yeah, exactly. It's good for you to know that I am presenting together with Kalle, so please feel free also to answer. There's 2 elements in your question, Jens. On the one hand, the COVID, and on the other hand, what are institutions of the authors, where we feel we are standing, and a lot of us are here. So I will also invite those to answer for their own institutions. But I've been switching around between institutions a bit in the meantime, so I have some comparison material there. But what we saw with the COVID, indeed, is that things changed. But also things suffered when you talk about curriculum agility. So the dynamic content, for instance, that became a super low priority, whereas changing assessment structures and blended learning, of course, hybrid learning, online learning became very important. So we have some indicators there that there were shifts but also that part of the principles suffered greatly under what happened. So how are we doing between 1 and 10?
Well, yeah, I think that's a very difficult question to answer, of course, and it varies between the different principles, I guess. And one thing that we've seen when we mapped these principles to the CDIO standards is also that there is a difference, and many of the standards bring in the aspects we have in the principles, but perhaps more on those regarding pedagogy and didactics and educational innovation rather than organizational structures. And even though we've seen these rapid shifts now, we don't know if there are shifts or if they're just exceptions as well. So where do we go? 4, 5? I don't know.
But before you have developed your rubric, maybe you cannot actually attach a figure to it.
True.
I think one of the really great contributions with this curriculum agility concept is actually the focus on some of the real barriers and drivers that you can have in curriculum development. Like the organizational part, we have talked about it a lot in CDIO, but we didn't really reify it in the concept as such. And I've been thinking, for instance, when I've been studying the curriculum development at Chalmers, I've been thinking that the great thing that you have achieved is not just the program itself, but it's actually the agility of the organization to set new targets and work towards them. And then 2 years later, you set another target because now you have the muscles to do actually what you want to do in the program. So I think if Mikael, you can just nod or you can say something.
Yes, we have just the ability to set new goals. I agree on that. And we also have this major initiative in education right now showing that we are, or at least somewhat agile and can adapt to the new needs and coming needs on the society. I agree on that. So perhaps 5 we challenge them to the number.
5 on a totally undefined scale.
Yes.
Reidar, you had your hand in the air.
Yes, I did. We're working at the NTNU. We're working with the as you well know, Christina. We're working on a redesign of the engineering and technology educations, and we think that by going towards a more program-driven perspective of the organization, so that it becomes more clear to more people in the organization that the student competence is coming out of the programs is the major focus of education. It shifts the focus, and hopefully that will make it possible to think of quicker ways of responding to those needs. And those needs are defined by our students, their future workplaces, and the existing and future problems in society. So that requires a greater degree of agility. So hopefully we can do that. So it's an experiment. But as for now, we're not where Mikael is. We're behind him at least. So
we're going to watch that experiment. So the last question is by Prasanna Ilankun. Prasanna, can we see you? She's been at the Luleå University of Technology in Sweden and is now in Sri Lanka to implement CDIO. Can you say your question, please?
Thank you very much, Christina. Yeah, I was just listening to this interesting presentation. I just wonder, to accommodate such agility, are we also talking about totally new means of curriculum development and curriculum revisions? Like my short experience is that the revisions take quite a while. It's not been a very easy exercise to accommodate such agility. Are we also looking at new techniques in terms of curriculum revisions? Thank you.
That's a very good question, and we actually started from new curriculum development and innovation, and there, depending on the organizational structure and perhaps even the national structure of education, there was more or less room to have this innovative education. But then we thought, okay, but we cannot just only try to make new things. We should also make what we have more responsive and more adaptable and more agile. So that's when we started looking at also what does it take for our current programs to become more agile. But definitely the new innovative developments are in there.
And time frames.
Yes.
New time frames.
Yes.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Wonderful.
Thanks.
Thank you. We'll keep an eye on your work. This is so interesting. Also very interesting is the next paper, proposing an optional standard on student engagement. I'm not sure if we have a video for it. It doesn't appear on the Hoover. Oh yes, wonderful. Thank you.
This is a presentation of the CDIO paper number 131, Student Engagement, a proposed optional standard. My name is Rationale from the Faculty of Engineering. My co-author is Dr. Danai Wangsarup from the Faculty of Medicine, Chulalongkorn University, Thailand. At first, we have to accept that there are many stakeholders in engineering education. When we start to revise a curriculum, we usually look first at the educational institute. We look at the professors, staff, we look at the students, alumni, practicing engineers, the HR administrators, as well as particularly the industry. We also have a look at the accreditations and the professional societies as well. And also the policymakers or the government have some input. Of this, I have to say that the student is a unique stakeholder. They are more or less the recipients of all the things that have been provided by the programs. When we look at the roles and activity of students, now we expect them to participate in class. There may be some active learnings and the learning activities. They may do some group works. They may have to do some projects, and also they give some feedbacks on the courses in the programs, as well as participate in other activities like in internship, industrial engagement, and the community service. Yes, but still under the programs and activities that are provided by the programs. This concept of student engagement is adapted to engineering after some discussions with professors in medicines. When we try to adapt the student engagement from medical education into engineering education, we have to make some change due to the context of this engagement. The sphere or the area of engagement have four main items: the management of the school, the provision of education, the academic and professional development, and industry and community service. You may note that some of these words I put in italic, meaning that they are adapted from the medical education. Meanwhile, the degree or the level of engagement comprising of three levels: the consultation, the partnership, and the leadership. When we look at each sphere of engagement, the first, the management of the schools, including the policy and mission and vision of the schools. And these things are the ones that I adapt from the medical education. Of course, we can select what is best and suit our context. I also put in some comparisons with the CDIO standards as well. For example, if the students are involved in the development of the school vision and mission, it means that it also accepts the CDIO platform, which means that it is about the CDIO standard 1. If they are represented in the school committees, particularly on the infrastructure that involves the CDIO standard 6, That's also as well as the policy statement and guidelines, particularly the one that funds the infrastructure. There's also standard 6 and may involve other standards as well. And if we look at accreditation process for the schools, this also involves CDIO standard 2 about integrated curriculum. The students are taking into the account decision about the faculty promotions and activities. That is also positive and maybe in the standard 10, which involves in the evaluation of staff performance. For the second one, the sphere engagement or the provision of education, something like the evaluation of the teaching and learning process, the feedback from the students, the use of active learnings, the peer teachings, so the active learning standards. For the peer assessments, that's also CDIO standards 11, the evaluations. For the sphere 3, the academic and professional developments are encouraged to engage in the research project carried by the faculty members. So that involves standard 9, the promotions of the faculty competencies. Students can also involve in the engineering education meetings, as well as the professional societies, particularly the student chapters. That's also involves standard 4. For the sphere engagement 4, the industry and community service, I think that's quite clear enough. Students are encouraged to involve in the project with the communities, to do some community service, to do the project with the industries, and also students have to involve in internships and the placements as well. Now, when we look at the degree of engagement, the lowest one is the consultation, where the students are asked about their views on the fixed process. This will result in incremental improvements. Then, the partnership. In this case, students also transform the process. And lastly, the leadership, when the students create new objects of engagement or the topics. So we can say that the degree of engagement indicates the transfer of power, responsibility, and ownership of the education. This is why the optional standard is proposed. The rubric for the proposed optional standards are as the other ones. The proposed optional standard is to systematically enrich CDIO standards with a high degree of student engagement. These pictures are some of the things that I have done. You can look at it more in the papers. That is the end of the presentation.
Thank you very much. This is a very welcome contribution because we have various practices when it comes to student engagements in different parts of the world. And we have sometimes compared and discussed, but it seems that the practices of student engagement are actually quite culturally dependent on the hierarchical differences and things like that. So it's very, very interesting to actually be a bit systematic in considering this. Do we have questions?
I just have a comment that the fact that you take along the transfer of power and the responsibility and the ownership, I think that's so key. That's what we noticed as well when we were trying to give ownership of learning to the students and saw all the discussions that provoked with our teaching team. So it makes teachers also have to redefine their roles, and sometimes that's a little scary. So, but I really, really applaud your initiative.
Thank you. Actually, what we found most surprising is that in the Faculty of Medicine, they have a student representative on the program administration. So it means that they have one student who knows everything, and they have a very nice channel of communication between the representative and the students.
I think it's very important that there is a when we appoint student representatives to boards, or we give them responsibilities, we share power, we have dialogue with them. It's very important also that they actually are representatives, so that they are democratically appointed within the student body. And so I think this is something that has to grow on both sides, both the university, how we involve the students, but also how mature the students are in terms of providing a very mature and good representation. So it's something that has to evolve in an interplay, I think, between the university and the student body. We have some very long-standing examples in the Nordic countries. For instance, in Sweden, students are on every decision body in the university. So that's an interesting case.
Yeah, that's nice. Actually, I think I do agree that it depends a lot on the culture. And on the other hand, I think it may be a nice way to break down the authoritative cultures in my part.
Yeah. Having been a student representative myself, I actually took 1.5 years sabbatical to work as a student representative full-time. And I think that's like the education that I had that prepared me most for CDIO and for developing education. It was a really interesting thing to do as a student. You really learned a lot, often more than from the courses, I have to admit. All right, no more questions. We can move on then to Anders Rosén, who will present the paper on the trying out the optional standard on sustainable development.
Will you play my presentation, or should I run it live? Or
so I'm asking the host, do you have the video ready, or do you want Anders to present? I think you can go ahead and present, Anders. You're last, so.
Okay, I'll try to keep it to 7 minutes then. So I'm sharing my screen. Can you see my screen now? Good, yes. Thank you.
Perfect.
So I'm going to present our paper entitled Experiences from Applying the CDIO Standard for Sustainable Development in Institution-Wide Program Evaluations. This is the outline. I will start with some background on this new CDIO standard. I will give you some insight in how we have operationalized it and calibrated it, and how we have made use of it when evaluating education programs at KTH, and then some conclusions. So I guess most of you are familiar with the CDIO standards. They are defining the distinguishing features of CDIO programs in terms of a set of principles and good practices. And they are 12 in total. And they have been around now for some almost 20 years. And during the last few years, they have been going through a quite substantial updating to take into consideration various change drivers, both external and internal within the CDIO community. And one change driver is the urgent need for societal transformations to ensure sustainable living conditions for ourselves and future generations. So the 12 core standards have been updated with respect to sustainable development. And then 4 so-called optional standards have been established, where one of them is specifically targeting sustainable development. And this standard for sustainable development is structured in the same way as the other standards. It has a characterization. Programs complying with this standard identifies the ability to contribute to a sustainable development as a key competence of its graduates. And the program is rich with sustainability learning experiences, developing the knowledge, skills, and attitudes required to address sustainability challenges. It also has a description where the actual definition of the standard is formulated. I will not go through it in detail here, And as the other standards, it also has a number of rubrics, different levels of fulfillment of this standard. Level 0, there are no sustainable development learning experiences in the program. Level 1, minor sustainable development learning experiences are implemented in at least one course, and the needs and opportunities for extended integration of sustainable development have been identified. And then all the way to level 5, where this standard is fully implemented. And when these new optional standards were introduced, they have been discussed for a few years, but in our paper from last year's conference, they were more formally introduced. Then the CDIO community was encouraged to document the work and share their experiences from using these standards, in particular reflecting on the usefulness of the new standards for future refinement and development. And with our paper here, we try to contribute to this gathering of experiences. So we have applied this new CDIO standard for sustainable development in quite substantial program evaluations of engineering education programs at KTH. And we started with a pilot study on 10 programs where we experimented with how should we actually operationalize this standard. And from the experience there, we also calibrated and suggested some modifications of parts of the standard. And then we applied it on quite many programs, and we based this evaluation on the formal program and course documents, together with the yearly program analysis reports that each program produces as part of KTH quality assurance procedures. Here are the calibrated rubrics. Based on our experiences, we are proposing some modifications of the rubrics, and you can see it in bold here. I will not go into it in detail. Here, I tried to illustrate a little bit the character of these different rubric levels, what they imply. So you can see here on a program that is judged to be on level 1, it has at least one minor sustainable development learning experience. For a program to be judged to be on level 2, it should have at least 2 sustainable development learning experiences, where at least one is more substantial. On level 3, there should be at least 4 sustainable development learning experiences. And here, a program on that level should, in addition to developing the students' knowledge about sustainable development, also develop the students' skills to actually do sustainable development. And then on level 4 and level 5, it's approaching even further to the full implementation of this standard, introducing key competencies, for example, or supporting the development. In our paper, we are also clarifying some definitions. For example, what is a minor sustainable development learning area experience and what is a substantial. And we are introducing a number of indicators which we can make use of for actually in detail go through a program as basis for judging on what rubric level it is. And here are examples of our program evaluation. You see in the columns to the right, there are 6 different programs that we have evaluated. You can see here how we have judged the different indicators. Some of them, for example, minor and substantial sustainability learning experiences, there we are just, it's quantitative, we are counting the number of compulsory courses, whereas the program objectives and plans and processes are a little bit more qualitative, subjective evaluation. And you can see in the bottom line how we judge these 6 programs in relation to the CDIO rubrics. 1 program on level 1, 3 on level 2, and 2 on level 3. And our conclusions, this concept of optional standard is new, and the role and the function of this standard still remains to be explored. But with the here proposed modifications of the rubrics and the introduced indicators and definitions, we conclude that this new CDIO standard for sustainable development is a useful tool for evaluating the integration of sustainable development in engineering education programs. And we also conclude that it's not only valuable for guiding and evaluating program development towards full implementation of this standard, but also for evaluating and promoting and guiding integration of sustainable development sustainable development in basically any program with any level of ambition regarding sustainable development. And we have actually found this standard so useful. So we have now integrated in KTH new sustainability objectives for the education, where by 2025, all Bachelor and Master of Science in Engineering programs should have reached at least level 3 in accordance with our modified CDIO standard rubrics. And all Masters and doctoral programs should have reached at least level 2. Thank you for your attention. I'm interested to hear your questions and thoughts.
Thank you very much, Anders. It's really interesting when you formulate something in the abstract first, but then when you try it on in practice, you get some realistic feedback so that you can fine tune it, and that's exactly what happened in this piece of work. So very, very useful. Thank you, Ulrika.
I would like, very interesting, first of all. And
sorry, I was very informal here. Ulrika Lundqvist from Chalmers.
Yes, yes, I'm at Chalmers, and I thank you very much, Anders. It was very interesting, and I really would like to do something similar at the programs at Chalmers. But I'm a bit curious, how did you, the program directors and the teachers, what did they react on your evaluation?
In general, positively. We had presented it to all the programs systematically, this evaluation. We were considering if we should involve the programs already in the evaluation phase, but we have evaluated, it's nearly 100 programs, so we had to limit the evaluation to some extent. But we have presented the results, and we have got some maybe surprises or critiques, but in general, we find that when we communicate what do we mean by a minor sustainable development learning experience and how have we judged that, then we have got overall positive feedback, and we are now working with several of the programs, looking together based on our results. How can we further enhance sustainable development in those programs? So in the paper, this was a very short, we have a lot of more things in the paper that you can read, and there we are giving some examples of what is a program on level 1, what is a program on level 2, and then we have made a more extensive report where we're really trying to provide input and basis for further development to the programs.
Great, thank you.
I think we had a question from Emanuele De Lucci from ETH. Yes.
Well, I studied at ETH. I am not at ETH at the moment.
Sorry.
No problem. I have a. I'm new here. Okay, so I don't know. I'm allowing myself to participate here. I have a provocative question. You evaluate these programs. I understand a program is a whole, course of studies. And the provocative question is, did you include in this evaluation also, lectures that are more theoretical in nature? I don't know, like maths and physics and these things. And are there any criteria or ideas or maybe wishes on how you can, in these kind of more abstract or general settings, implement or have elements that can encourage these sustainable development goals?
Thank you for that question, Emmanuel. It's very interesting and it's very relevant, and we have that kind of discussions at KTH a lot, but I think maybe it's a little bit outside the scope of this presentation. I can tell you a little bit how we did this evaluation. That we, as I explained, we looked at the formal documents, and then we looked at the program analysis reports, and there we identified which courses, what are the program objectives, what do we find in the program objectives regarding sustainable development, and then we looked at all the compulsory courses, and we identified where are there learning objectives related to sustainable development, and then we did a little bit more analysis on those specific courses. So a math course which didn't have any learning objective concerning sustainable development, we didn't consider it at all. And then also I want to comment that with the integration of sustainable development, I think it's the same as the integration of professional skills like communication skills, collaboration skills that we are working with a lot within CDIO, that it's not, the issue is not to squeeze it in each and every course. We look at it from a program perspective. So how can different courses take different responsibilities for progressing the students' knowledge and development and skills and attitudes? So each and every course cannot and should not have aspects of sustainable development. But I've seen examples of math courses and physics courses which are more theoretical, or thermodynamics, for example, with really interesting integrations of sustainable development. So I hope that to some extent answered your question.
Thank you. Yes, yes.
From a philosophical perspective, it's actually quite challenging, because we are arguing that we should integrate these things where they are, where they belong, where they are relevant, etc. But the more integrated things are, the more difficult it is to discern that they are there. They become so natural that they are. So if you teach optimization, for instance, which is very, very useful for sustainability problems, but maybe it's not visible that you are actually contributing to the sustainable development skills. Ola Leifler from Linköping University.
Just a comment,
Yes.
Christine. I agree with you, but our life was so much easier when it was linear and we could confine our teaching within specific disciplines. It was so much more comfortable for us, and having concern for sustainable development, it increases the complexity. But just because it's difficult, it doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. More the opposite.
But if you look at the world, I mean, the most common strategy is to put one course there, which is called sustainable development, and then you're done, you've checked that box. So we are doing something which is more advanced, really. Sorry, Ola, you get the last 2 minutes if you want.
All right, thanks a lot. Thanks very much, Anders, for your presentation. Having been through a similar process of sorts, I believe that you had kind of a centralized approach to this, with a small group of people with fairly similar understanding, maybe, of how to interpret these different sets of standards. Do you feel that that helped you gain acceptance that there's a common way to view the different optional standards for sustainable development? Or did you feel that the program developers that you communicated the results with felt that you were out of touch or had completely different ideas about this than they would have? Because we felt that the program directors we distributed this to had different ideas altogether. Some were very optimistic about their contributions and others less so. What was your impressions?
Yeah, I can understand your view there. And I think for us, it was very important to really anchor this among the faculty. If we had just dropped these results on the head of the teachers and programs, I think it would have created a lot of fuss or so. But we were really, and the KTH top management were a little bit concerned. How will this be received by the teachers and programs? But we really tried to explain that this evaluation has limitations. These are the things that we have considered in the evaluation. We have not considered everything. This is how we have interpreted things, and we tried to discuss it. So I think when working with this, it's important to also consider how do you frame your message, and how do you yeah, you have to be pedagogic. How do you educate the organization to consider these different aspects?
And the transparency helps also.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you all. This was a great session. We have in a little less than 10 minutes, we have the poster teaser session, which is one of the most dynamic and enjoyable occurrences in a CDIO conference. So don't miss it. And then there is the newcomers welcome session. So if you feel like you are a newcomer, please join that, or semi-newcomer is probably sufficient. Thank you all, the presenters, or the audience who asked great questions, and it was lovely to see you. Thank you.